This is a work group for the planning board, town of Newbury. Today is the 8th of December, 2019. The intention of this work group is to have an open discussion regarding, in this particular meeting, this discussion will be our wireless communication and the potential implications and what we can do to bring this to a potential bylaw or modification at our next Springtown meeting. Our work group is focused on doing this over the next 6 weeks and then getting its information and recommendations to our board for review, and then from our board, the planning board, to the select board if all progress. So members that I see, if you can acknowledge when I ask and I call it your name, Leslie Matthews.
Yes, here.
Mary Stone.
Yes.
Woody Knight.
Here.
Thank you. And Town Planning Director Martha Taylor.
Here.
All right. How's that without a script?
That's good. I guess we're participating via Zoom.
We are participating. And if there's anything that I need to add, Martha will add that now.
Right. And if there's if this work group makes any votes, I guess they need to be roll call votes.
Very good. Excellent. Go ahead, Martha. I cut you off.
No, that's it. So I emailed all of you the draft, both the markup that our consultant David Maxon had from Isotrope had provided, as well as a clean copy, and the analysis that they had done from their drive-through. Did everybody get that?
Yes.
Yes. So let's, Martha, I'm going to have you drive the discussion with regards to the markup and its recommendations.
I'm going to be very honest. I haven't really gone through it to refresh myself on it. I think maybe the place to start, because the recommendations come from there, would be to go through the analysis that they did. I mean, there were recommendations on two major recommendations. One would be to increase our overlay district, which right now currently is just the business and light industrial district, to include some other locations in town which were identified as low coverage areas. And then the other recommendation, which is not in the bylaw, would be to develop regulations for right of location, which would be granted by the select board for wireless facilities to go into the right of way or on public property.
I'm looking at the second attachment, I believe, which is Article 22. It's a zero. It's titled 0303 document X. Is that the one we're going to start with, Martha?
The clean copy, that one. So it's yeah, Article 20. So this is as far as we had gotten for the 2020 ATM, and then everything ground to a halt because of COVID, and it became clear that we couldn't move forward with this. And so this is a draft that was in place at that time. So it was done in March of 2020. And I can share it on the screen if you would like, and we can go through it.
I think that'd be the best way to do, because unfortunately my technology is failing me and I'm looking at 3 small iPads in a phone. So yeah, if you could screen share that, I think that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Okay, are you able to see that?
Perfect. And can you enlarge that at all by chance? Oh,
yep. Is that better?
Good, yeah, and I can do that on this thing too. Excellent. Okay. Perfect.
Oh, if it would help, maybe we can just kind of go through it sort of section by section. I think the major changes come a little bit later.
Yep.
So I believe the purpose stays pretty much the same as it was, which has to do with protecting the general public, protecting scenic, historic, natural, and human-made resources of the town, et cetera, et cetera. And then this is a slight change. We had, we were calling this their wireless communications overlay district. So this is specifically to identify locations where towers could go as opposed to other kinds of wireless facilities like pole mounted antennas and things like that. So he was suggesting to change this to a wireless communications tower district specifically for the towers. And the first location would be the business and light industrial district where they are allowed now. And then to add some new locations for better distribution, as he says. A few of from the analysis that they did, it appears that something on the Triton property, or there's, I guess, an adjacent town-owned parcel down there off of Elm Street, locations north of the Parker River. He had specifically noted that, the DPW could be a good location in terms of coverage, problematic location in terms of other criteria such as fall zone and setbacks and things like that. So I think this will be, a significant thing that we will need to discuss is locations and how we reach out to perhaps property owners or whatever, like
Hey,
Triton.
Martha, can I interrupt just for a sec?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I should have said in the opening remarks, and I apologize for not saying such. The reason the planning board is looking at this particular bylaws, it's a public safety issue. We have concerns from both police and fire, as well as citizens, as to poor self coverage in the community, and so we're looking at this to address that situation so that we can facilitate better public safety. So I just wanted to make that point, Martha. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no, that's a very good one to make. Because it is critical. We know that there are areas of limited coverage down near Black Duck Circle on 1A, parts of Byfield, and over on Plum Island. And these are mentioned quite frequently. So the next section would be to basically say that these would be allowed by special permit from the planning board. Right now, cell towers are allowed by special permit from the ZBA. So this would change the permitting authority from the ZBA to the planning board. Pursuant to this bylaw. And then these are the considerations that would need to be taken into account in terms of permitting. I'm just going to kind of scroll down through these. General use restrictions. So I think, I'm sorry, I'm trying to refresh myself here. So wireless communications. So he's talking about the wireless communications tower district, and also additional wireless communications facilities, which are the WCFs, could be added to towers. Oops.
Can you just talk for a second what the wireless communication on flat poles would be like as opposed to towers, Martha, just so everybody here can understand that?
Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of what you said. I'm going to close my door a little bit more. There's a bunch of noise outside.
I was wondering where that was coming from.
I'm sorry, what was your question? Or
So just so that everybody on this meeting understands the type of proposals we're talking about. So first we're talking about tall towers, but the second is repeater type broadcasters, which can go on telephone poles.
yes, yeah. I'm just kind of scrolling back to see whether he's defined that here. But yes, the WCFs would be essentially be the transmitters or the antennas that would be put on towers or on poles. We do have one member of the public who has joined us, Hans Tans.
Thank you for joining us.
So this talks again about the towers, the type of towers, monopole, no lattice or guy wires, which is consistent with what's in our bylaw right now. Height of the tower, not exceed 65 feet or greater height necessary to provide adequate service. So the applicant would have to prove that that greater height was needed. Finish grades need to be basically the existing grades. Property line, setback, I think, again, this is consistent with what we have now. It's a distance equal to the vertical height of the tower with the appurtenances measured at the mean finished grade of the lower of the tower base. Setback can be reduced by 50% if there's a good reason to do that. And fencing around the tower. So this would allow wireless communications facilities, so the antennas and everything in all districts, subject to the following requirements. But the towers would only be limited to the overlay or to the tower district. This talks about traffic.
So that's actually a very important distinction, Martha, with regards to where its hall towers can be versus the pole mounted facilities, correct?
Yes, yeah.
What, Pete, what are you, just underground lines, how feasible is that in how many locations? Just generally, I mean, is that rare?
Martha, do you want to talk about, well, let me even back up a little bit further. So what we're doing is we're trying to create a bylaw. Now, it doesn't mean, which would allow for things to happen. And Martha, correct me if I speak, if there's something I say that is not accurate. This would allow it to happen. It doesn't mean it's going to happen because
Okay.
the different providers, whether it's, I'll say, for example, Verizon or some other carrier, they would have to, petition the town, for an application to do this, and
Right.
then this would allow it. But right now, that mechanism doesn't exist in our bylaw. So even if they were to come before us, we would say it could only happen as it is now. This would allow more flexibility. Is that a good way to explain it?
Yes, I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this sets out the requirements and the process to allow these to happen. And I think it's one distinction actually that our consultant David Maxon made. He said, the providers will look at areas where there's coverage. So just putting this in place doesn't guarantee that we will actually get providers in here knocking at the door saying we want to put these antenna up or whatever. But at least it allows the process to happen. So does that answer your question, Mary?
Yep, thank you. Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Let's see, this talks about the submittal requirements. Plans and drawings, photo simulation. Most of this is pretty consistent with what we already have, getting a balloon test and so on and so forth to actually pinpoint the height, complete description of all the required data. There are noise criteria, and review and action by the planning board. And here are criteria under which the board could issue, or the process for issuing a special permit, monitoring and inspections, then compliance and violations. Then there's a section on modifications, eligible facilities requests. This was actually something that the board added a few years ago. Previously, any modifications to an existing tower essentially required that the applicant go through the same permitting process as the original. And this laid out some provisions under which the building commissioner could approve a modification, like adding an antenna or something like that, without it having to go through this special permit process and public hearing all over again. And it would be up to the building department to determine whether it actually is an eligible facilities request, or if it needed to go through permitting process. And then there,
I have a quick question, if that's all right.
sure.
What exists now with the current towers that are in town for adding antennas and stuff? We don't have anything?
In terms of changing them out or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, these provisions are already in our bylaw for
okay,
making those kinds of modifications.
okay. In our current bylaw.
In our current bylaw, yes. Yeah, I think that was adopted in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And then there are provisions, because we made an effort at that point to bring it up to kind of current law and regulations, but didn't do the overhaul that we're now trying to do with this bylaw. Section on removal. And then exemptions, which is consistent with what we have now. And then there are the definitions, and actually maybe this would be helpful to go through. So the eligible facilities request that we were just talking about is a request for modification of this existing tower or base station that doesn't substantially change the physical dimensions of the tower or the base station. And eligible support structures, anything that's lawfully existing at the time the application is filed with the town. Let's see. The tower wireless communications tower, that's the WCT, wireless communications facility, which we talked about earlier. Installation of equipment belonging to one party that includes antennas, transmitters, and receivers, ancillary equipment, structural supports, etc., but not the tower itself. And that's basically a really quick overview. And again, I apologize, I wasn't able to go over it in detail myself before we met.
I think that was great. Are you kidding me? This stuff is.
So anyway, this is where we left off back in 2020. Town council had not had an opportunity to review this, so I think that would be one of the next steps that we need to take, is to have council review it and see if there are any changes that would be recommended there. And then the other part of the discussion is coming up with the grant of location. And I think the other two documents that I sent you from Hull, and I can't remember the other one, you know, go to that. So that's separate from
Somerville, the other one?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, I knew it was an S town.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so, yeah, I read these over and it seems a little bit more, the Hull wireless facilities that nailed a lot of it in detail, so I didn't see any issues with that. But I mean, just changes that we would need to make, that's all. Just remember reading it with interest.
So I'm wondering whether it would make sense, you know, before we actually send this on to, well, I don't know, backtrack, Pete, and maybe I'll kind of refer this to you. Whether this working group would like to make any suggestions regarding either changes or questions or whatever, kind of get a revised working draft, submit that to the entire board for review and discussion, or send it to council before it went to the entire board.
I think it would make sense, Martha, just for time considerations, is to maybe have council look at the draft that we have now to see how how it fits, and then bring that to the board once we have that insight. Because if we are working from something that wouldn't be appropriate, I think we'd be spinning our wheels a little bit. So I think to have the insight from council would be helpful. I'm looking at the town of Hull. There's drills down into, of course, all the different definitions, and there are some things that are much more defined. So they talk about the pole, the wireless installations of what they're calling SWFs, which would not in any way interfere with an ADA compliant situation. And they're talking about the right of way, and their stipulation is that the equipment be no more than 10% larger volume of radial dimensions from its mounted surface. So they're actually defining how large it can be on the pole. So Hull seems to be a lot more drilled down. And I don't know if we want to do that or if we want to stay away from that approach.
Yeah, and I think that I believe that that's specifically really for, grant of location facilities as opposed to what
Okay.
what this is talking about. So one's on public property or within the right of way.
Mhm.
And there is one question which council may be able to answer. I know that there was a time period within which towns could actually draft some bylaws or regulations that would basically regulate the aesthetics, including the size. That window may have passed, but I might be misspeaking. So that would be something to see whether we still, can work that into any right of location language or whatever.
Because I remember having a conversation with him about the height of the poles, and the poles couldn't exceed, was it like 40 feet? Do I remember that correctly?
Within the right of way?
Right, correct.
Yeah, I actually don't remember that.
Okay.
I don't either, but I do remember him talking about you could switch out a pole to receive these so that you could put a taller pole in, but I don't remember the height either.
So there's the 40-foot pole and then but we can't, what was the 65
The
foot?
65 was for a tower itself. So
Okay.
a monopole.
Yeah.
And there is a provision that height could be exceeded if the applicant can, the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove that the coverage can't be achieved at the 65 feet max.
Are private citizens allowed to apply if they have the correct amount of land to have a tower put on their property?
Oh, good question.
I think in the past they were allowed, but I'm not.
Well,
sure.
under our current bylaw, there were some attempts. One of the local farms in particular wanted to put a tower on their property. It was outside of the district. It was in the residential agricultural district. And ultimately, I believe that one was denied by the ZBA as opposed to withdrawn. So I think that, I could be misspeaking again, but I think that if an applicant can prove that there is no coverage in the area or inadequate coverage, the town might need to allow it. I think in that case, it didn't. But I think I'd want to put that question back to town council.
Okay.
Appurtenance. Appurtenance. For towers other than towers of public right of way involves adding an appurtenance. Am I pronouncing that?
Pertinent, where are you?
I am 2 on number 11. for towers other than the towers.
Under definitions.
Yes, indeed. Goes to 2. For towers other than towers. Keep going.
Farther down.
Oh, wait a second. It's number 11, definitions, and it's 2.
But not two under base station.
It's okay, definitions 3.
Oh, this one?
Right there, yes. Number 2.
Right.
Other than towers of public right of way involves adding an
Appurtenance.
appurtenance. Oh, God, what does that mean?
So basically adding, I don't know, something to the body of the tower, something attached to the tower.
Right.
I'm trying to think of a good,
It would be like an add-on. So, you know, the tower comes in and then this like an enhancer.
right, or
How do you pronounce it?
appurtenance.
Appurtenance. So add, right, okay. Add something that makes sense.
Yep, so it's basically, some piece of equipment that would be added to the body of the tower, something that's related to the, the function
Right.
of the
To
facility.
expedite the process. Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hate none of this stuff. I have sort of an overview question, Pete.
Yes, go ahead.
If I'm a private citizen and I'm getting really bad service and it's affecting my work, my communications with friends and family and whatever else, how can I make sure that what's happening with the planning board and the board of selectmen and the whole town is going to be a process that is not dragged on, but is expedited? And how do I stay on top of that?
I don't know if I have the answer to your question.
If I'm sitting out there and listening to what we're talking about, I'm going, I just want to get service. How do I get this? What am I, what are they trying to do here? And can I be assured that it's going to happen as efficiently and expeditiously as possible? And does that impact work today?
I apologize. You're going to hear a dog barking in the background. I'll try to minimize that noise.
Maybe he's answering. He's answering the question, Pete.
There you go. What we're doing is to give the guidelines so that the vendors, the wireless vendors, can bring in other types of technologies to get better signal coverage. The town can't mandate that or tell a vendor what to do. I know what I had to do in my particular situation when I was, I think I had Sprint as a vendor. I contacted them and, we went through a bunch of things and they looked at their maps and they ended up sending me a little antenna that went in the house basically. And that rebroadcasted their signal, and that improved my signal at my residence. The first step is always to contact the vendor that you're working with to see if there are any enhancements that they can do.
Okay.
And that's what I did. But what we're trying to do is just to provide, again, the mechanism to allow vendors to supply additional coverage. And quite honestly, when we spoke with our consultant, Martha, his name was?
David Maxon.
David. When we spoke with David, when he was looking at the maps and he was looking at our population and, of our community and everything else, he didn't think this was going to be a high priority item for vendors at that time. Now that might have changed. Their business models might have changed. There might be more interest in because everyone seems to be moving towards at-home work with more digital coverage. So there might be a higher degree of interest. But at the time when we were talking with him, he said, for lack of saying, we were very low. We weren't high on the priority list. Would that be fair, Martha?
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, that's exactly what he said. It's a situation where we are trying to, broaden our bylaw, as Pete said, to allow different technologies to make the process a little bit easier than it is right now.
Right.
While we're still protecting the town's interests as well.
Right.
So it's a fine balance between
Yeah.
trying to increase coverage, but it's not a case of if you build it, they will come. If we build it, we can hope that they will come. But the vendors themselves are going to have to see that there's a need in the community. If they get enough complaints, enough heat from the various people who are using their services within the town, then they will probably start looking seriously at more coverage here. There have been attempts to put an antenna on poles, but right now, since we don't really have any bylaw that kind of covers that, and this would be outside of the our overlay district, it's been difficult. So this hand in hand with the grant of location should certainly open up the opportunities for increasing coverage.
Martha, did the consultant advance these suggestions before the whole COVID communication issue came up?
Yeah, I mean, we were working on this. We started working on this in 2019.
Right.
We were at this point for the 2020 town meeting, and then everything shut down. We weren't even sure we were going to have a town meeting, and we weren't, we couldn't go forward with the public hearings that we needed to have and all of that. So this was all pre-COVID.
So that was 2019. It's now
Yeah,
2021.
Yeah,
What?
I mean, this draft is dated March 3rd of 2020.
Okay. So this really, the plates have shifted dramatically. And that's what my concern is now, is that if I'm out there and I had to go through this whole COVID thing and I had to communicate, I couldn't do it. Have that where you don't have enough bandwidth to send a file or something, or it doesn't go through fast enough or clearly. Maybe we should be thinking a little bit more aggressively about how these communications can be improved. I mean, with the providers, that if something in a town is needed by a group of people, then is it up to the group of people to have to band together and beat on the provider, or is it maybe, can we do anything to expedite it and make sure that people get the communications they need when they need it now more than ever?
Well, I think the first step is we have to have the mechanism to allow the different service providers to do it. And so that's what our job here is, to try to do that, is to provide the mechanism. And then it'll be up to, their decision making. And as you say, Mary, people, registering concerns to their providers, their wireless providers, that things aren't what they should be. And then it's up to the providers, the wireless providers, to say, okay, we're going to put additional equipment, or we have this technology that we can bring into this service area that can facilitate better communication. So we have to do this piece, I think, to help them with what they would need to do. And then it's going to be up to the wireless carriers to do it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Martha, I'm looking at the Hull bylaw that Emily sent, and it's really, really, really detailed. I mean, down to coloration on advertisement, logos, what would be allowed, what won't be allowed, historical concerns. I mean, they're very, very drilled down on their approach. Do we want to consider it? Do we need that, or do we want to stay away from that?
Again, I think those go back to some of the aesthetic criteria, and I would like to check with council to see how much
Okay.
leeway at this point we have to drill down on that.
Okay. So right of way and then locations are two big components that we need to bring back to the planning board with this.
Right. Would it be helpful now to pull up the analysis that they did? Yes.
Yes. Let's look at that, because this will be a map, if I remember correctly, that is this going to be the map, Martha?
So it probably would be the map, I think. And there were suggestions that were made. So I think ultimately the board will need to make recommendations on locations, but let me stop this and
Maybe it's just me, but I found these charts pretty confusing. I mean, where there's good coverage, where there isn't good coverage, I'd improve it, but I just found it confusing. But
so are you able to see that?
Yes, and if you can enlarge that a touch.
Yep. Let's see. Sorry, got the wrong one here. Need to do it up here. All right, how's that?
That's great, thank you.
Okay. So just go through this quickly. So Isotrope did a drive test through the town, the major service carriers, and identified what sort of where the good coverage, where adequate coverage, marginal coverage, and holes in coverage were for each of the three. So it was Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. They also noted where the different providers are, the carriers, and different locations. So the cell sites that we have right now, we've got the Byfield Water Tower that has all three. The Sled Road Tower on Route 1 has all three. 319 Newburyport Turnpike, that's at the Old Newbury Golf Club, has only AT&T and Verizon. The Salter Yard on Scotland Road has AT&T and T-Mobile. The police tower on Scotland Road has only Verizon. 50 Parker Street Tower, trying to think of, oh, that's in Newburyport, so that's T-Mobile and Verizon. And then there's a tower in Rowley, south of Newbury, which was unknown. So these are the drive maps. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller again because it's not fitting entirely on, actually. Can you see all of it?
no,
Okay, I'm just going to reduce it a little bit.
I think when I figured this out, it was a different color. So I couldn't understand it. Okay, go ahead.
So is this good now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this was the AT&T drive test, and just as a refresher, the green is excellent coverage. So there are a few green areas here. The yellow is what they call the network design goal. The blue, and there's a lot of blue here, is marginal coverage, and then the black are areas of poor coverage. So this was for AT&T. T-Mobile, I think AT&T was actually a little bit better. T-Mobile had poor coverage in more areas of town, but we're seeing similar things like down on Cottage Road, areas over in Byfield.
Right.
Verizon had better coverage in some of those areas, like Cottage Road, not so bad. So it had the least amount of poor coverage in town, but still a lot of marginal coverage. And looking over at Plum Island, it's sort of it's a mix. This identifies the existing towers, so the Parker Street, the two on Route 1 over at the bus yard, on the water tank, and then the one down in Rowley. And it's correlating the different coverage. So this was AT&T again. This one was, this is also AT&T drive test, sorry.
I have a question on that last map.
This one here,
Yeah, it's showing Triton and DPW red spots on there, and I didn't understand that.
oh yeah, I think, okay. So what they were doing, I think this was existing low band coverage, and these are all for AT&T. So if a couple of the spots that we talked about, we're adding a tower at Triton and one at the DPW. With the Triton Tower at 100 feet and DPW at 90, which both exceed our bylaw. How the coverage would change.
So that's those two red dots are showing that.
Right,
if
so this
those-
would,
Was in those two locations that would improve.
right, right. And this was, they looked at putting a tower on Old Town Hill, or what they're calling Little Old Town Hill. And this looked at doing a tower at Triton and one down on Plum Island.
Martha, I asked this question, but you know, the tower that's in Raleigh, is there, we don't know anything about that tower because we have a bunch of question marks as to who the vendors are.
Right,
Uh,
right.
You know, would that, you know, help if there's any way to enhance the signals there? Would that help our you know, Old Town, do you think?
I think if I recall the discussion.
Oh, the
correctly-
hills in the way. That's right. The
Well,
hills in the way.
I think the issue was, I mean, the hill's in the way for the signals coming from the
Right.
towers on Route 1.
Right.
This, I think he felt could be beneficial, but we don't really control it. So it
Okay.
seems like, you know, signal coming from here could potentially help the issues down on Cottage Road.
Right.
And maybe, you know, part of the lower end of Route 1 or 1A before it hits the river.
Mhm.
I think he said too, if I remember, that the Raleigh Tower was already covering part of Newbury and
Okay.
we were in the area of
Yeah,
the DPW would help relieve the strain on the Raleigh Tower now. I remember him saying something.
Okay.
about it.
Thank you, Woody. I don't remember that. That's helpful. That makes sense.
yeah. So I'm just going back up through here. I mean, it seems like even adding a tower on Plum Island doesn't really seem to do a whole lot for the inhabited parts of Plum Island. So whereas adding what it helps.
Martha, what is the, where's the tower that serves Plum Island? I'm just confused.
And right now, these are the towers that we have in town. So I would say probably the one that's here, or possibly the one that's here in Newburyport, are the two
Okay.
essentially serving Plum Island. The
Okay,
tower here, any signal, you know, part of the issue is that Old Town Hill is in here and blocking the signal from going from here over.
so you stick something up on Old Town Hill, is that the issue then?
I think
That
my
helps?
recollection is that regarding
not- Right.
it would kind of overshoot. It's like it's
Correct.
too high, so it overshoots and doesn't really serve those areas very well.
Okay, so the other thing is that any of these coastlines have problems, or up in the hill too, with the wind. because that can knock out the communication. The higher it is and the closer it is to the ocean, right? I mean, that's been my experience in Nova Scotia. So the tower was on a hill, and as soon as there was a storm, the signal would go out. So I don't know if that's an issue here.
I don't know the answer to that, Mary.
Yeah, I don't either.
I know that Plum Island cell phone service is poor, depending on your carrier, like real poor, so. Especially if you're on the beach.
Not that I would want to suggest this, Martha, but technology does grow leaps and bounds. And would it be worth just a touching base back with our consultants to see if there's anything new that we should be aware of before we write this bylaw? Or do you think we should be comfortable writing the bylaw and then letting technology catch up?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing, that
Yeah, good idea.
basically he came to the end of his contract, so I would need to talk to Tracy to see about, potentially getting a few hours of time from him. But I think at this point, we're looking at a bylaw, which is, it's over a year and a half old. So I think it would be worth taking a look at that. And also to Mary's point about COVID, whether there are any provisions that really specifically address more of the work from home issues, which I know when residents and select board members have brought this up, that's certainly a concern as more and more people are working from home here and making sure that they have good coverage to conduct the business that they need to. So it's both public safety and
it's job security, quite frankly, because many of the companies that I've worked with in the past are shifting out of the office. And those who can do it remotely, expeditiously, are getting the best contracts, getting the best jobs. So it really does boil down to, for part of this, for us, is to make sure that those people who need this coverage can get it so they can work. It's just so different now. It's a year, but it's a huge difference.
no, I agree with you. And I think that's going to be continuing. Certainly, certain people I know who have been working, who are in the private sector, are now working almost exclusively from home. And it looks like that's going to go on indefinitely. And they're even considering moving to other parts of the country, but they still can change their, still can keep their jobs, even if they're remote, significantly remote from their office. So,
Indeed.
and also a lot of people now have given up their landlines. So there's more and more heat on the wireless in any case.
All right. Okay, I think that helps us with the appreciation of the map of the coverage on our maps, Martha. So if we could go back to, here we go. So we have a working draft. I think it makes sense to have council look at this draft, see if there's anything that's glaring to them that we would need to give considerations to. I'm fearful that might take some turnaround time, some extensive turnaround time, because I know that they're busy, but I think that's the next step. And then whatever those recommendations are, we could then take a gander at them. If it's an extended period of time to get those recommendations back from from council, then we might have to have that discussion with a full board. And then we can make our modification from there. But I really want to keep this moving if we can. And if we can shoot for a target of 2 weeks for us to meet again, or the board's meeting in next week, Mark? The board's
meeting on the 15th, right?
Okay. Well, we'll be able to report back to the board. We've sent it off to council, and hopefully we can meet in 2 weeks and maybe have their input so that in the following week after that, we can have another discussion with the full board to see where they want to go with this and what they want to recommend, if there is a recommendation to go to the select board. Because we do have, yes.
Does it make sense to have the consultant review this first and see if there have been any dramatic changes in the market that would change what we're presenting to council, which might be more efficient?
Sure. I think Martha's going to have to reach out through Tracy to get authorization for probably a few more hours of consulting review for that to happen. So we can basically have two tracks going on. We can have this going with council. We can maybe have the short review with our consultant to give us any additional information. So both things can be going on at the same time. Because I do want to keep this on track since we have our hands on it now. Let's see if we can pass it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes me more comfortable.
yeah. I guess my one concern about, my original thought also is to send it out to both at the same time. My concern is knowing that council's time is very, needs to be spent wisely, whether it would make sense to get the consultant to look at it first.
Right.
If we can get turnaround quickly. Rather than having council review this, then having recommendations come back and having to review it again.
I'm for that. Whatever track seems most appropriate to keep this so that we can meet our benchmark.
Yeah.
So we get it to the select board so they can get it on the warrant if they so desire.
You know, I think, you know, the February date, basically, we were requested to have a draft in hand. We have a draft. I mean, we could actually to at least get the select board to refer this back for public hearing. You know, we've got language. So if we can't get it completely buttoned up by February 1st, we do have something working. But I think we've got a solid enough base that we can get it further by then, but it doesn't need to be perfect at that point.
Okay, good. Then let's see if we can have our consultant re-engaged and see if we can get that authorization from a town administrator. And then as that's going on, see where council's at with their availability, and then slide it from one hand to the other hand, and then we can get a look at it, and hopefully within a few weeks. That'd be wonderful.
That's good. Martha, what do you believe that the consultant will be available and anxious to get this done? Because that does factor into the whole attorney review.
Right. No, absolutely.
Okay, good.
I think I'll reach out to Tracy as soon as we get off of this meeting, just to see if we can be authorized to do this, and I'll reach out to him today and see what his availability is. He was very responsive last time.
Great. That's great.
But again, this is 2 years after we first discussed this with him. So
hopefully he's available.
right. If it turns out that that's going to be problematic, then I would suggest that it just go straight to council for review.
Right. Safety is very paramount, obviously, but people's livelihood is very valuable as well. And if I were listening in to this discussion, I would really want to know that you guys saw the whole urgency of this matter. Not that you don't. I'm just saying, if I'm listening to this from the outside, I'm thinking, geez, snap out of it, guys. I got to get to work. I think I lose my job.
Right.
Appreciate. So yeah, we're picking it up. We've taken it off the shelf because we didn't have the resources and the time or the ability, and so here we are, and we're going to try to get it as quickly and as expeditiously. I don't know if that's a word.
Expeditiously.
No.
Opportunities.
Manner that we can promote it for the town to give it consideration. I think that's very important. I agree, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Yep. And we have a good group, so we'll get it done.
Yep.
So.
Woody, any thoughts?
No, I think I've said it. I've asked the questions I had to ask, and I just think that hopefully the consultant's available, and then we can get this off to council.
Beautiful. Leslie, any concerns?
None at all.
Okay, great. Mary, I've heard your thoughts. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just want Woody to make sure that we get everything done fast. Good job, Woody.
We'll put
All
some
right.
today into it.
No pressure.
Okay.
Martha,
In
any other
in
thoughts?
the mean- in the meantime, I would suggest if any of you have any questions about any of the language or specific provisions or something like that and want to send them to me, assuming we do get the consultant engaged again, I can pass those on to the consultant to see if they can be addressed.
Perfect.
Great,
Okay.
thanks.
Everyone, I want to thank you very much. And for public viewing in, thank you for viewing with us. And I think we'll wrap this meeting up. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, any discussion? All right, how do you vote, Madam Leslie?
Yes.
Thank you. How do you vote, Madam Mary?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. And Sir Woody?
yes.
Wonderful. And the chair's in favor as well. Hey, thanks, guys. Martha, thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.
Great,
Martha,
thank you all.
thank you so much. Peace, see you guys.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Bye.